The Council's desperation. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council floated in the depths of space, a magnificent structure built from crystallized starlight and quantum-locked matter. For 15,000 years, this hall had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the resolution of countless conflicts, and the steady march of progress across the galaxy. 63 species called this place the center of galactic governance, and their combined wisdom had brought an age of unprecedented peace and prosperity to billions of worlds. Today, however, the atmosphere in the hall was thick with fear. High Chancellor Mordain stood at the central platform, his 4 arms gesturing at the holographic display that dominated the chamber. The display showed a map of the galaxy, but large sections of it were now marked in ominous crimson. These were not territories in dispute or regions experiencing political turmoil. These were voids. Empty spaces where thriving star systems had existed just weeks ago. The phenomenon continues to spread, Mordain announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. He was a Valkyrie, one of the founding species of the Council, and in his 300 years of life, he had never seen anything like this. We are calling it the Void Plague. It appears without warning, consumes everything in a star system within hours, and leaves nothing behind. No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything ever existed there. A murmur of distress rippled through the assembled delegates. Ambassador Thesha of the Corlani Unity leaned forward, her bioluminescent markings flickering with agitation. What of the scientific teams we sent to study the phenomenon? Surely they have discovered something? Mordain's silence answered the question before his words did. The research vessels we sent to the affected systems have not returned. We assume they were consumed as well. Whatever this force is, it does not discriminate. It takes everything. The Archon of the Zenthari Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with urgent light. Our predictive algorithms suggest that at the current rate of expansion, the Void Plague will reach the core worlds within 4 months. We must act immediately. Act how? Demanded General Kraxus, the military commander of the Council Defense Fleet. His reptilian features were set in a grim expression. We have thrown our best weapons at this thing. Quantum torpedoes, singularity bombs, even temporal disruptors. Nothing works. The void simply absorbs our attacks and continues spreading. Our ships cannot even get close enough to study it properly before they are pulled in and destroyed. The hall descended into chaos as delegates argued over possible solutions. Some suggested evacuating entire sectors. Others proposed using forbidden weapons from the ancient wars. A few even spoke of surrender, though to what enemy no one could say. Mordain raised his arms for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke words that many had been thinking but none had dared to voice. There is one option we have not yet considered. One resource we have not yet tapped. Speak plainly, Chancellor, urged Ambassador Thesha. Mordain took a breath, knowing that what he was about to suggest would provoke strong reactions. 150 years ago, a species made contact with us. They called themselves humans. They came from a world on the outer rim, a planet they named Earth. They requested membership in the Council. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. They remembered. We denied their request, Mordain continued. We found them too aggressive, too prone to violence. Their world was harsh and it had shaped them into warriors. They fought each other constantly, even as they reached for the stars. We told them they were not ready for civilized society. We told them to return in a few centuries after they had learned to live in peace. And they vanished, added Counselor Vareth, an ancient being who had been present at that fateful meeting. They withdrew from all contact. We assumed they had destroyed themselves in their wars as so many young species do. It was regrettable but not unexpected. What if they did not destroy themselves? Mordain asked quietly. What if they are still there? The implications hung in the air. General Kraxus was the first to respond. You are suggesting we ask these humans for help? A species we rejected and dismissed? Even if they still exist, why would they assist us? Because the alternative is the end of all life in the galaxy, Mordain replied. Because if the Void Plague is not stopped, it will eventually reach their space as well. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully, because we were wrong about them. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Galactic Council did not admit mistakes easily. Ambassador Thesha's markings flashed in a pattern that indicated deep thought. I served on the diplomatic station near human space during their contact period. I observed them closely. They were indeed violent and chaotic, but they were also remarkably adaptable. They solved problems in ways we never considered. Their thinking was unconventional. Unconventional thinking is precisely what we need, Mordain agreed. Our methods have failed. Our technology, refined over millennia, cannot combat this threat. Perhaps a fresh perspective, even from a species we deemed primitive, might offer solutions we have overlooked. This is madness, protested one of the junior delegates. We would be admitting our weakness to a species we rejected. The humiliation alone. Humiliation is preferable to extinction, Mordain interrupted sharply. 3 star systems were consumed last week alone. 17 billion lives, gone in an instant. How many more will die while we protect our pride? A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Finally, Councillor Vareth spoke, his ancient voice resonating with authority. I support the Chancellor's proposal. We must contact the humans if they still exist. But we must be prepared for the possibility that they will refuse us. We scorn them. We may find that they remember. The vote was called. It was not unanimous, but it carried. The Galactic Council, rulers of the galaxy for 15,000 years, would humble themselves before a species they had once deemed unworthy. The diplomatic vessel Eternal Horizon was prepared for the journey. It was smaller than the grand ships typically used for council business, as this mission required speed rather than ceremony. Mordain himself volunteered to lead the delegation, stating that if they were to beg for help, it should be done by someone of rank and authority. The journey to human space took 3 days. As they approached the coordinates where human territory had been marked on the old star charts, the crew grew increasingly nervous. Long-range sensors detected nothing. No communications, no ships, no signs of civilization. Perhaps they truly did destroy themselves, murmured one of the crew members. Then everything changed. Alarms blared across the bridge as 6 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly around them. The vessels were unlike anything in the Council's databases. They were sleek but aggressive in design, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons that looked both advanced and brutally efficient. Unknown vessels, you have entered restricted human space, came a voice over the communication channel. The language was galactic standard, but the accent was distinctly human. Identify yourselves immediately and state your purpose. Mordain moved to the communication station, his heart's pounding. The humans had not destroyed themselves. They had built this. A military fleet that had appeared from nowhere and surrounded a council vessel before anyone could react. This is High Chancellor Mordain of the Galactic Council, he announced, trying to keep his voice steady. We come seeking an audience with human leadership on a matter of extreme urgency. The galaxy faces a threat that may destroy all life, and we require assistance. There was a long pause. Mordain could almost feel the human commander considering his words, weighing them, judging them. The Galactic Council, the voice finally responded, and there was something in the tone that Mordain could not quite identify. The same council that told us we were not civilized enough to join you. The same council that dismissed us as violent primitives. That Galactic Council? Yes, Mordain admitted, feeling the weight of those past decisions crushing down on him. The same council. And we were wrong. Another pause, longer this time. Then, you will be escorted to the Mars Defense Station. Any deviation from the designated flight path will be considered hostile action. Any attempt to scan our systems will be considered hostile action. Do you understand? We understand. The human ships formed up around the Eternal Horizon, and Mordain noticed something that made his blood run cold. These were not patrol ships or defense vessels. These were warships, heavily armed and clearly battle-ready. And from what his limited sensors could detect, there were dozens more in the system, perhaps hundreds. During the 150 years of human silence, something extraordinary had happened. The species the Council had rejected had not fallen into chaos. They had prepared for war. As the Mars Defense Station came into view, massive and bristling with weapons platforms, Mordain realized that the humans had not just survived. They had thrived. And now, the galaxy's fate rested on whether they would forgive the Council's past arrogance. The docking procedure was smooth but tense. As Mordain and his small delegation disembarked, they were met by a human military honor guard. The humans stood at attention in perfect formation, their armor advanced and their weapons clearly functional. Everything about them spoke of discipline and readiness. A woman stepped forward. She wore a military uniform with insignia that Mordain did not recognize but clearly indicated high rank. Her hair was gray, her face lined with experience, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. High Chancellor Mordain, she said, her voice formal and controlled. I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chin, Supreme Commander of the United Human Defense Force. Welcome to Mars. You said the galaxy is in danger. We are listening. Mordain looked at the Admiral, at the soldiers behind her, at the massive station around them, and he understood fully for the first time what the Council had rejected 150 years ago. Not primitives. Not savages. But warriors who had spent their isolation preparing for the day when the galaxy would need them. Now that day had come, and Mordain could only hope that humanity's memory was not as long as their preparation had been thorough. Humanity's answer. The conference room on Mars Defense Station was austere compared to the ornate chambers of the Galactic Council. Plain metal walls, functional furniture, and tactical displays dominated the space. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chin sat across from High Chancellor Mordain and his delegation, her posture relaxed but alert. Behind her stood several other human officers, their expressions unreadable. Mordain had spent the last hour explaining the Void Plague in detail. He showed them recordings of systems being consumed, shared what little data the Council had managed to gather, and outlined every failed attempt to stop or even slow the phenomenon. As he spoke, he watched the humans carefully, trying to gauge their reactions. They listened in silence, asking occasional questions that were pointed and technical. They wanted specifics about energy signatures, expansion rates, and attack vectors. They did not interrupt with emotional outbursts or expressions of horror. They simply absorbed the information like soldiers receiving a mission briefing. When Mordain finished, Admiral Chin leaned back in her chair. So the Council has tried quantum weapons, singularity bombs, and temporal disruptors. All absorbed or ineffective. Your ships cannot get close enough to study the phenomenon without being pulled in. And at current rates, this void plague will consume the core worlds in 4 months. That is correct, Mordain confirmed. And you have come to us because your own methods have failed, Chin continued. After 150 years of silence. After telling us we were too violent and primitive to join your council. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Mordain felt the weight of them, the justified resentment behind them. Yes, he said quietly. We rejected you out of arrogance and prejudice. We believed our ways were superior, our civilization more advanced. We were wrong, and I am here to admit that publicly and formally. The Council was wrong about humanity. One of the other human officers, a man with the insignia of a general, spoke up. That is a nice apology, Chancellor. But apologies do not tell us why we should risk human lives for a council that scorned us. Why should we care what happens to you? Mordain had expected this question, had prepared for it during the journey. Because the void plague will not stop at council space. It will continue spreading until it reaches your systems as well. Because billions of innocent lives are at stake, lives that had nothing to do with the council's decision to reject you. And because... He paused, meeting Admiral Chen's eyes directly. Because I believe humanity is better than we are. I believe you will help not because you owe us anything, but because it is the right thing to do. Admiral Chen's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. She stood and walked to one of the tactical displays, manipulating it to show a star map. During the past 150 years, humanity has not been idle, Chancellor. When you rejected us, it hurt. Many of our people were angry. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to prove you wrong. She expanded the display and Mordain's breath caught. The human territory shown on the map was vast, far larger than the small cluster of systems the Council had documented during first contact. Dozens of colonies, hundreds of outposts, a network of defense stations and shipyards. We built, Chin continued. We expanded. We prepared. Earth taught us that the universe is dangerous, and the Council taught us that we could not rely on others for protection. So we created the United Human Defense Force. Every human colony contributes to it. Every ship we build is designed for war as well as peace. We train constantly. We innovate relentlessly. We are ready for threats, whether they come from hostile species or from the universe itself. She turned back to face the delegation. But we also learned something else during our isolation. We learned that strength without purpose is meaningless. That survival without compassion is hollow. We became warriors not because we love violence but because we love what we protect. Another human officer stepped forward, a younger woman with the bearing of a scientist. I am Dr. Elena Rodriguez, head of the Human Strategic Research Division. We have been monitoring Council space from a distance. We detected the void plague 3 weeks ago and have been studying it remotely. Mordain sat up straighter. You have been studying it? Why did you not contact us? Because we were not sure you would listen, Dr. Rodriguez replied bluntly. And because we needed to understand what we were dealing with before making any commitments. We have developed some theories about the nature of the void plague. She activated another display, showing complex mathematical models and energy readings. The void is not a weapon or a natural phenomenon in the traditional sense. We believe it is a dimensional breach. Something from another layer of reality is bleeding through into our universe, consuming matter and energy to sustain itself. Your weapons fail because they are designed to affect things in our dimension. You are essentially trying to shoot at a shadow. If that is true, Mordain said slowly, then how can it be stopped? By closing the breach, Dr. Rodriguez answered. Or more accurately, by forcing it to collapse on itself. We would need to destabilize the dimensional barrier at multiple points simultaneously, creating a cascade effect that would seal the tiers. General Marcus Webb, the officer who had spoken earlier, crossed his arms. The theory is sound, but the execution is dangerous. We would need to send ships directly into the affected zones, plant dimensional charges at precise coordinates, and detonate them in perfect synchronization. The margin for error is essentially zero. Any ship that gets too close risks being pulled in before completing its mission. And you would need pilots willing to fly those missions, Admiral Chen added quietly. Knowing they might not come back. Mordain looked around at the humans, understanding dawning. You have already developed a plan. You were preparing to act even before we arrived. Chen nodded. We were debating whether to intervene. Some argued that the Council deserved to face this threat alone after how they treated us. Others argued that letting billions die because of old grudges would make us no better than those who rejected us. Your arrival has resolved that debate. She walked back to her seat and sat down, her gaze steady and unwavering. Humanity will help you, Chancellor Mordain. We will commit our fleet, our technology, and our people to stopping the Void Plague. But we do this on our terms. Name them, Mordain said without hesitation. First, human forces operate under human command, Chen stated. We will coordinate with Council fleets, but we will not follow Council tactics or doctrine. They have proven ineffective. Our methods are different, and they need to be implemented without interference. Agreed, Mordain said immediately. Several of his delegation looked shocked at how quickly he had conceded, but he silenced them with a gesture. Second, Chen continued, after this crisis is resolved, humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. Not as junior members or probationary participants, but as equals. That will require a formal vote, Mordain replied, but I will personally guarantee that it passes. The Council will not refuse after you have saved us. Third, Chen said, and her voice grew harder, the Council agrees to significant reforms. Your civilization has grown complacent. You have forgotten that peace must be defended, that threats can emerge from anywhere. Part of our membership conditions will include modernizing Council defense doctrines and establishing permanent rapid response forces. This was a more difficult demand, touching on the fundamental structure of Council governance. But Mordain looked at the tactical displays, at the evidence of human preparation and capability, and he knew they were right. I cannot promise the Council will accept all reforms immediately, but I will support them with everything I have. You have my word. Admiral Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then we have an accord. General Webb will command our military operations. Dr. Rodriguez will serve as chief scientific advisor. I will maintain overall strategic command and liaison with Council forces. She stood, and the other humans rose with her. We deploy in 48 hours. I suggest you contact your fleet and inform them that human forces will be arriving. We do not want any misunderstandings when our warships enter Council space. Mordain stood as well, feeling a mixture of relief and awe. Admiral, may I ask a question? Of course. Why? Mordain asked simply. After everything, why help us? Chen was silent for a moment, then she smiled slightly. It was not a happy expression, but there was something genuine in it. Because 150 years ago, you told us we were too violent and emotional. You said we were not civilized enough for your Council. And maybe you were right about the violence. We are warriors. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day, and it made us hard and dangerous. She walked to the viewport, looking out at the red surface of Mars below. But you were wrong about what that means. Being a warrior does not mean loving death. It means being willing to fight for life. Our violence is not cruelty or savagery. It is fierce protection of what we hold dear. And right now, billions of innocent people are in danger. That is enough reason for us. Mordain joined her at the viewport. The Council has much to learn from humanity. And we have much to learn from you, Chen replied. Your technology, your wisdom, your experience governing a galactic civilization. We are not perfect, Chancellor. We have our own flaws and failings. But together, perhaps we can be better than either of us could be alone. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The human fleet assembled at the edge of their territory, and Mordain sent word to the council about the incoming assistance. The response was mixed. Some council members were relieved. Others were skeptical. A few were outright hostile to the idea of accepting help from humans. General Craxus, the council's military commander, was among the skeptics. When he arrived at the rendezvous point and saw the human fleet, his doubts only grew. There were over 200 human warships, each one built for combat with heavy armor and multiple weapon systems. They looked brutal and inelegant compared to the sleek council vessels. "These are the saviors we are relying on?" Craxus muttered to Mordain. "They look like flying fortresses." "That is because they are," Mordain replied. "And right now we need fortresses more than we need elegance." The first joint operation was a test mission to study the Void Plague's edge. Council ships provided long-range scanning and support while human vessels moved in close, deploying specialized probes designed by Dr. Rodriguez. The coordination was awkward at first, the different command structures and tactical philosophies clashing. But then something remarkable happened. A Council science vessel's shields began failing as the Void's pull grew stronger. Before Craxus could order a retreat, 3 human ships moved in, using their superior armor to shield the Council vessel while it withdrew. One human ship took severe damage, its hull buckling under the dimensional stress, but it held position until the Council ship was clear. After that, the skepticism began to fade. The Council forces started to see what Mordain had recognized. Humans were not reckless. They calculated risks and took calculated actions. They just had different thresholds for acceptable risk, especially when other lives were at stake. Dr. Rodriguez's dimensional charges were deployed at carefully calculated points around the Void Plague's largest manifestation. It took 3 weeks of constant effort, with ships pushing closer to the phenomenon than anyone thought possible. Human pilots flew missions that had survival rates below 50%, and they did it without hesitation. Council crews watched in amazement as human ships limped back from the edge of the void, hulls scarred and systems failing, only to be rapidly repaired and sent out again. The humans seemed tireless, driven by a determination that bordered on obsession. Finally, all charges were in place. Admiral Chin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, with General Craxus and Mordain beside her. Around them, the combined fleet held position, weapons ready in case the plan failed. "All teams report ready," General Webb announced. "Detonation sequences armed and synchronized." Chin looked at Mordain. "Last chance to back out, Chancellor. If this does not work, we will lose a lot of ships and people." "If it does not work, we lose everything anyway," Mordain replied. "Proceed." Chin nodded. "General Webb, execute." The dimensional charges detonated simultaneously. On the tactical displays, energy readings spiked across the spectrum. The Void Plague, which had been steadily expanding, suddenly convulsed. Space itself seemed to twist and buckle as the dimensional breaches were forcibly collapsed. For a moment nothing happened. Then the void began to shrink. Slowly at first, then faster, reality reasserting itself as the tears between dimensions sealed. The phenomenon that had consumed dozens of star systems was collapsing, pulled back into whatever realm it had emerged from. Cheers erupted across the Council ships. Even the normally stoic Council officers were celebrating. But on the human vessels the reaction was more subdued. They had won, but they had lost 37 ships and over 12,000 personnel in the process. Victory was not something to celebrate wildly when it came at such cost. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the celebrations. "All ships, this is Chen. Well done. Council forces, thank you for your support and coordination. Human forces, you have my respect and my gratitude. Today we proved that when different peoples work together, there is no challenge we cannot overcome." She paused, then added quietly, "And to those we lost along the way we remember. Your sacrifice saved billions. You will not be forgotten." 6 months later, Mordain stood once again in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. The chamber had been repaired after suffering damage from a Void Plague manifestation that had appeared dangerously close to Council headquarters. The scars had been left visible as a reminder of how close they had come to extinction. The hall was full. All 63 species had gathered, along with the human delegation. Admiral Chin, General Webb, and Dr. Rodriguez stood in the section traditionally reserved for new member species, wearing their dress uniforms. Mordain approached the central platform and began the formal ceremony. 150 years ago, this council made a decision that we now recognize as a grave error. We rejected humanity's application for membership based on incomplete understanding and prejudiced assumptions. We deemed them too violent, too primitive, too different from our civilized norms. He paused, looking around the chamber. Then the void plague came, and our advanced civilization, our refined technology, and our ancient wisdom proved inadequate. We faced extinction, and in our desperation we turned to the species we had rejected. We asked them for help, expecting refusal or demands for compensation. Instead, humanity gave us something we did not deserve: grace. Mordain gestured to the human delegation. These people saved us not because they owed us anything, not because we had welcomed them, but because it was right. They risked everything to protect billions of lives, including the lives of those who had scorned them. In doing so, they taught us that true civilization is not measured by technological advancement or cultural refinement, but by the willingness to stand for others even when it costs you everything. He raised his arms in the formal gesture of proposal. I move that humanity be granted immediate and full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights, responsibilities, and honors therein. Furthermore, I propose that we establish the position of Coordinator of Defensive Operations, to be held by humanity for the next century, charged with modernizing our defensive capabilities and ensuring we are never again caught unprepared. The vote was called. It was unanimous. Every species, even those who had been skeptical, voted yes. The chamber erupted in applause as Admiral Chen stepped forward to accept. She stood at the platform looking out at the assembled delegates. When the applause finally subsided, she spoke clearly and firmly. On behalf of humanity, we accept membership in the Galactic Council. We come not as conquerors or as saviors but as partners. We bring our strengths and we acknowledge our weaknesses. We offer our fierce determination, our adaptability, and our refusal to accept the impossible. In return, we hope to learn from your wisdom, your experience, and your diverse perspectives. Chen's expression grew more serious. But we also bring a warning. The void plague was stopped, but we do not know if it was destroyed or merely driven back. There may be other threats out there, dangers we cannot yet imagine. The galaxy is vast and full of mysteries, and some of those mysteries are dangerous. We must remain vigilant. We must stay prepared. Peace is precious, but it must be defended. She smiled then, and it transformed her entire demeanor. Yet despite the dangers, despite the challenges ahead, I am hopeful. Today marks not just humanity's acceptance into the Council, but the beginning of a new era. An era where different peoples, different philosophies, and different approaches work together. Where we learn from each other and grow stronger for it. That is worth fighting for. That is worth protecting. The applause that followed was deafening. As the ceremony concluded and delegates mingled, Mordain found himself standing with Admiral Chen on a balcony overlooking the galaxy beyond. You know, Chen said quietly, when you rejected us 150 years ago, many humans were devastated. We had reached for the stars hoping to find fellowship, and instead we found rejection. It took us a long time to move past that pain. I am sorry, Mordain said sincerely. We were wrong. You were, Chen agreed. But in a strange way that rejection made us stronger. It forced us to rely on ourselves to build our own path. Maybe we needed that. Maybe both our peoples needed this journey to arrive at this moment. She turned to face him. The galaxy is going to change now, Chancellor. Humans do not do anything halfway. We will push for reforms, challenge old assumptions, and probably irritate a lot of comfortable council members. Are you ready for that? Mordain smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Admiral, after watching your people fly into the void itself to save us, I think the council can handle a little irritation. Besides, comfort is overrated. It was our comfort and complacency that nearly destroyed us. Perhaps a bit of human disruption is exactly what we need. They stood together in companionable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, dangers still lurked. Challenges awaited. But for the first time in a long time, Mordain felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The galaxy had changed the day the Council asked humanity for help. And in seeking salvation from those they had rejected, they had found something far more valuable. True partners, true friends, and a reminder that civilization's greatest strength lies not in perfection, but in the courage to admit mistakes and grow beyond them. Humanity had come home at last, not as the primitives the Council had dismissed, but as the warriors, innovators, and protectors the galaxy desperately needed. And together they would face whatever came next.